For a very long time, the Philippines has been in the shadow of major powers. The United States for almost a century, and more recently, China. But what about other powers? In recent years, the Philippines has been cultivating ties with Japan, with South Korea, with India, and under President Duterte, even with Russia. One country that the Philippines perhaps could build even a more fruitful and extensive relationship with is France. As far as France is concerned, it is not just any power. It is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It's a country with nuclear weapons. It has one of the biggest economies on earth and one of the most sophisticated companies and brands anywhere on earth. Since President Emmanuel Macron took over the Élysée Palace, France has tried to reassert its influence on the international stage. In fact, recently, President Macron created a lot of controversy when he suggested that France does not want to necessarily follow the United States on major geopolitical issues, including Taiwan. Well, to be fair, President Macron, or at least his supporters, claim that he was misquoted or his words were taken out of context. But the reality is that as far as Macron is concerned, he's just echoing what many French presidents have been saying for the past half a century. What France wants is strategic autonomy. And with France developing greater voice on the international stage and trying to flex its diplomatic, economic, and even military muscle, deploying naval assets all across the Indo-Pacific more and more throughout the years, the question is, what is the state of Philippine relationship with France? To better understand that, we have no less than France Ambassador to Philippines, Michéle Boccoz. In this interview, we're going to discuss all important dimensions of bilateral relationship, not only defense, not only economics, but also culture and people-to-people cooperation. We are honored to be joined by the French Ambassador to the Philippines, Your Honor, Ambassador Michéle Boccoz. I hope I got the pronunciation of your family name right.
Perfect.
Yeah, because usually if it's French, there's like silence there. I don't know which. So thank you very much, Merci Desuvoir. Thank you very much for joining us. So today we want to talk about a lot of things, right? And what we want to do in this show is not just to come with, just quotable quotes, but we really want to, get to the bottom of some of the important issues. But before that, and this is really where I hope we'll have a different approach to discussing bilateral issues and all, is we want to get to know a little bit about you, Ambassador. You have built quite a reputation here in Manila, in a good sense, the caring ambassador. I also remember even at the height of the pandemic, you were very active. You were trying to reach out to a lot of experts, etc. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Ambassador? How did you end up as the French ambassador to the Philippines?
Oh, well, that's a very difficult question. But I was never posted in Asia before I came to the Philippines, but I traveled to Asia quite a lot. And I used to work in different backgrounds. I'm a career diplomat, but I also have very strong interest in health issues.
Right.
And I worked for a biomedical research institution at some point called the Pasteur Institute, and worked on opening Pasteur Institutes in Asia and creating a network. That didn't happen in the Philippines, but after I went back to diplomacy after leaving the World Health Organization. I went back to diplomacy, and I felt that I was really attracted about going to Asia because there's so many things happening in Asia. And somehow, in my view, the Philippines and France have very, very much in common.
Right.
And I was sure it would be really a good match, and that there's a lot we could do together. There's a lot more, and there's a lot of understanding and common culture, common taste. There are lots of things we love in common, like food,
Right.
like singing, like sport, basketball or football. But there's a lot we have that we can share, and I thought it would be nice to be able to bring our two countries even closer together.
I'm just curious. So you have a background in medical sciences or something when you work in the Pasteur
Really,
Institute?
I mean, I'm really a career diplomat, and I've been
Right.
trained as a diplomat. But things came a little bit by accident because I was posted in Geneva to our permanent missions on multilateral diplomacy.
Right.
And I got really interested in WHO because it was a time when Dr. Brundtland became the Director General, and she created a transition team between the time she was elected to the moment she took office.
Right.
And she asked some people to join her, and I was asked to join her team, and I got really interested into health issues. And so when I left Geneva, I joined the Pasteur Institute. And then I went back to traditional diplomacy. But then just before coming here, when Dr. Tedros was elected as WHO Director General.
It's quite known to all of us. Unfortunately, not for the best reasons sometimes.
Well, but then he asked me to join the team, and my government agreed, and I was seconded to join WHO. So I worked in WHO for 3 years. So, you know, it's a little bit of how things happened. I find it very, very interesting, in fact, to be in the Philippines because there's such a variety. And there's so much we can do in people-to-people relation, and just listening to people, getting to understand them better. And that's why I was reaching out a lot, even during the pandemic, because of course it was a bit more challenging to meet people face to face at the time. But you could still reach out, you could still have contacts with people, you could still listen to them, get to understand what were their concerns and where did they see our relation, what could we do to make it better. What can we do to bring more people together? And that's where I started from.
It doesn't feel as distant as you would have expected, even if it's on the other part of the world. Yeah.
No, it doesn't feel distant at all. Yeah. It feels, we have so much proximity. So we're saying there's so many things that you like, that we like, that make us immediately very close. We can click together very easily because of that. And of course, there's no language barrier because so many people speak perfect English here. So,
and French too.
And French too. Yes.
I had friends back in college who used to work in French call centers, right? And they had this perfect Parisian accent and all. So I think for that reason, you know, it's easy to converse. It's easy to deal with people. But I wanted to also ask about, of course, you also came at quite an interesting critical juncture, I would even say, in Philippine history. This is towards the end of the Duterte administration, and then we were heading into elections. I think that's the time we all got to know each other. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because, of course, on one hand, the Philippines felt familiar, but in some ways, Philippines was not even familiar to some of us from the Philippines when we were under the previous administration, because President Duterte was really a sui generis for a lot of us. You know, the way he questioned our alliance with the United States, the way he pushed for his own version of what I call Asian Values 2.0. He was an unprecedented political figure as far as the Philippines is concerned. At the same time, of course, he's quite familiar in the sense of he's similar to Donald Trump, so I would say, some even to Le Pen or Bolsonaro, those kinds of leaders. Did you feel that it's going to be more challenging coming to the Philippines at that time, or did it make it more exciting in a certain way?
Well, the Philippines is really a vibrant democracy, and you have a very active civil society. You have a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, and this is the way democracy is. And you have people that are your presidents, your parliaments. They're elected by the people. People make a choice, and that's what happens everywhere. So what we have to do is to try and see where we can relate and what it is we can do together, and we can work across the board with a number of partners in the Philippines. So that allowed us to have also many opportunities to hear about different opinions also in the Philippines, and so it went. It wasn't so difficult in that sense, you know, in trying to relate. What was more difficult was the fact that you couldn't really interact directly with people. You had to interact from a distance. And so that makes it a little bit less natural, because when we are face to face, like we are now, we just interact and we are in a person-to-person conversation. When you are talking to somebody whom you've never met before and you meet on the screen, you know, it creates a distance, and it's not so easy. So I think that was my main challenge when I first arrived. But then you get to know the country, you have to find your way around. And that means listening to people, trying to understand what's happening in the country, what are the areas where you can move things forward. And you can always move things forward. You can always try to enhance the bilateral relation, but it evolves over time. It evolves with of course, having elections in the country means that there's going to be a dramatic change in the country. or I mean, because you know in this country that your president only has one term, so whatever happens, it's going to be a new president. So necessarily it's a change. So it's always a challenge, but it's also a new opportunity because then you can perhaps tackle new fields and develop cooperation in other areas.
Ambassador, when you came here, of course there was already kind of a baseline in terms of bilateral relations. But personally, I would think that there's so much room to our relationship with Europe. And my sense is it's vice versa. That's the sense I get. When I was in Paris, when I was in Europe, is that we have a lot in common, but it's not like we have tapped into the shared interests as much as we could have. I mean, in the Philippines, of course, for a long time we were in the shadow of the United States. There's still a top alliance to us, and then there's the rise of China, right? But Europe, of course, is a very important player globally. And in a sense, Philippines is also emerging as an important player in this part of the world, geopolitically, economically, otherwise, not to mention our people are all around the world, including in France. What were your priorities when you came here? Like, what kind of goals did you set for yourself? What are the things that right away you felt you have to build on?
Well, we felt we had to build on the people-to-people relation to begin with, because this is really the foundation of a strong relation. So it means listening to people, it means talking to people, it means understanding what we can bring together, which is why we French people always are very active in cultural diplomacy, soft diplomacy. Students are also trying to teach people how to speak French, and also trying to learn other languages, because I try to learn Tagalog as well, not easy, so I do understand why people find it difficult to speak French too. But I mean, that's part of our relation, and so that's how we start building the relationship, people to people, culture, and so on. Which is why we also decided to celebrate then afterwards our 75th anniversary of bilateral relations. Last year, but we're continuing, because we started on the 26th of June, which is the date of the signature of the Treaty of Amity. But we decided to continue because, after all, it's a whole year, 75th anniversary. Initially, we thought we would stop at the end of December. And then we said, well, after all, we're addicted to it. We really like it, so we can continue a little bit. So we're going to have more events coming till June. After pandemic, after people had to live more secluded lives, we thought that culture and all the dimension, culture can be very broad. People to people is very broad. It's students' relations. It's food. It's sports. It's all kinds of activities. Singing. It's fashion. It's everything that concerns people can be part of people to people relation, and was part of our 75th anniversary. And the economic dimension was there as well, and more contacts, and trying to get people to actually come and visit, which wasn't so easy initially, but becomes easier and easier as time goes by. So we thought this was the way to tackle things and to start getting closer and to start working with the Philippines.
Speaking of people visiting, what are the numbers now? I mean, are things on an upward swing when it comes to French coming here? Like, I would hear a lot about, a lot of French people coming to our beautiful beaches here, a lot of people doing remote work, digital nomads,
Yes.
I heard even in Siargao, we have a lot of French coming into the Philippines, investing here. Also, I'm hearing that a lot of Filipinos are visiting France, etc. What is the trajectory there in terms of tourism and cultural exchange?
Well, it's really getting back to, actually even more people traveling than before the pandemic. We have more French people coming here. We have more French people coming for business reasons because our companies are more present here, and so they're bringing more people, which is one thing. But there are also a lot of tourists coming, and the Philippines is becoming a much better known destination. This is becoming a top destination for scuba diving, for example, but also going around discovering the country and all the different aspects of the Philippines culture. So this is growing, and the numbers of Filipinos going to France is really dramatically growing. I mean, last month, for example, for the month of March, if we compare to the number of visas, for example, we delivered in 2019, which
before
is
pandemic.
Before pandemic, 2019 is our benchmark. It's the highest point. This March, we delivered 20% more visas than we did in 2019.
Than pre-pandemic.
So that's a lot. It's a big race. And
are these tourists, or they're going to work in France, study in France?
There's a bit of a mix. I mean, there are people working in France, but there's also business people. And I think if we look at business visas versus tourism visa, it's about maybe 20-25% business, and all the rest is tourism. including pilgrimage, which is
Right.
quite important.
To
Also,
your
lots of people
monasteries and,
going
yeah,
to
important,
Lourdes
yeah.
or going to other places. We even have also relics of French saints visiting the Philippines. You know, do you know that we have Saint Therese of the Child Jesus? So you know that shows
We're
how
both
close
Catholic
we are.
majority countries.
Yes,
One of the things that, you know.
So it's a lot
Yeah.
of relationship in that way. So it's growing. It's definitely growing. It's growing fast after the pandemic. I thought it would perhaps take longer.
Right.
And we see the flights are full, and we would probably need even more. I mean, it shows the relation is growing.
What did you think about Filipino food? Because one of the things that I noticed in Europe, in the West in general, is that, you know, when you say Southeast Asia, it's Thai food, it's Vietnamese food. The Thai one I kind of understand because there was really an organized effort by their government and their foreign ministry to build the Thai brand. Vietnam perhaps more organic, especially in France because of the huge Vietnamese French community there. What were your expectations? Because I know that Philippines is not as much known for its food, but many people are surprised when they come here as like, oh, it's something different. And also the other reason I'm asking is because France is like the gold standard for gastro food diplomacy. I mean, the whole Michelin star thing started with you guys. The whole, you know, the food branding really started with France. What is your experience so far in the Philippines? I'm sure a lot of chefs in Manila have been trained in France or they're coming back. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, it's very interesting because I think the food scene in Manila
Right.
is really, I mean, in the Philippines, is really vibrant
Right.
with local specialties that are really different from one city to another.
And region, yeah,
And the
exactly,
region,
yeah.
I've been, I don't know, to Bacolod, for example,
course.
and they have very special,
Chicken.
different
Yeah,
type
chicken.
of cuisine. And there's a lot of creation. There's a lot happening in the scene here. There are lots of interactions between France and the Philippines. You know, during our 75th anniversary, we
Right.
brought a chef, free
Exactly.
Michelin star chef, Alain Passard, and the idea was not just for him to come and cook French cuisine. We're not really interested in that. We're interested in also
Fusion,
doing things
yeah.
together, fusion. So it
Fusion,
was,
yeah.
he cooked dinners with Chef Jessie or
Right.
with Chef Margarita Forrest. And there are more Filipino chefs also in France, and they
Right.
have Philippine restaurants in
Right.
France. And there are Filipino chefs that have been trained in France, and some of them are coming back to the Philippines. I visited one of those restaurants recently. A chef that had been doing cordon bleu. He
Right.
had his restaurant in France. He worked with the best chefs in France, and now he's back here. And he's doing an incredible fusion cuisine again
Right.
between Philippine and French, and tasting menu and pairing with wines, and incredible creative. So it's really a vibrant scene, and there is
Right.
so much happening there, and more traditional, more more creative, innovative, mixing flavors. So that is extremely interesting, and I think it's getting better known in France, and we would like to also make sure that
Yeah.
the French tourists also come here to the Philippines
For
to
food
discover,
diplomacy, for food
those,
tourism, yeah.
those creative chefs and the young generation coming with new ideas. A lot of perspectives.
Because my sense is, I mean, as someone who quite travels a lot, is having Michelin star really helps. It
Yes.
really attracts, particularly more, sometimes posh kind of tourism, etc. In Istanbul, for instance, a number of restaurants are going in that direction. It put immediately Istanbul on the map in ways that perhaps it was not before for food tourism. Are we looking at, for instance, bringing Michelin people here? Do you think that would help? I mean, because I also wondered, why don't we have as many in the Philippines? Like in Lima, in Peru, for instance, I think they have a lot of Michelin stars. And the beauty of Peru is that it's also very fusion. There's the Asian side to it. There's a Latin American side. Of course, Tokyo, one of the highest per capita Michelin stars. So a lot of our neighbors here are actually building in Thailand. You have street food folks already have Michelin star.
Yeah.
So what's going on? I mean, maybe that could be one of the centerpiece of your term in the Philippines. I mean, I hope before you leave the Philippines, you have a few Michelin star, at least 2-star ones here in Manila.
Yeah, actually, I think it would be a very good idea
Right.
to do that, because a lot of people now, I mean, tourists travel for all kind of reasons.
Yeah.
And it used not to be the case in the past, but now more and more people travel for food, because they just want to have the food experience. And obviously, if you have Michelin-starred chefs in a country, that's really very attractive. And people would come to the country to discover the food through those restaurants. And they would do many other things, and they would get to know the country and appreciate other dimensions in the country. But that's a very good entry point. So definitely would be really good to have some chefs in the Philippines that would be recognized Michelin-starred chefs. And that would be a good way of starting, because then they would be attracting new chefs, they would be also training other chefs, and that would go around the country. Also using the variety of the different cuisines. You have cuisines from the Cordillera, you have cuisines from
Maranao, and then of course Ilocano, where we come from, very vegetable heavy. I mean, one of the things I always get from the less informed foreigners, especially some of our American friends, who say, "Oh, Filipino, it's all like pork and oil." I said, "You have no idea. You haven't tried the Ilocano food. It's very vegetable heavy. You know, when I come from Baguio, it's where this is big for us, you know." So I just felt, you know, the diversity of our cuisine is not as much appreciated. But I also know, looking at the history of Peru, of Thailand, etc., how things could change in very few years, especially if you got the Michelin star. But Ambassador, sorry for being ignorant about it. How does it work? Like, you have to invite them to come here? Like, how does it work? Should there be the concerted effort to get them here? Like, how does the review process really
Yes,
get
I think
going?
you can definitely invite them. I think the Ministry of Tourism in the Philippines, I mean, I don't want to speak in their behalf, but I think they're quite interested in that. And yes, definitely, you can reach out to them and invite them to come and discover. And of course, you would need to show that you have a variety and that you already have chefs that could be reaching this kind of standard, which I think is the case in the Philippines. You also have great hotels, and I think that's also part of the attraction. And of course, to have a red Michelin guide, you have to have enough, you know, substance. But you could start with their website, because they have a website, and they have
sorry for making you a free consultant. Philippine Ministry of
but
Tourism,
definitely, I mean, they can post already some comments on the Philippines on their online. There's an app. Have you downloaded the Michelin app?
No, I mean, I knew Michelin because of the tire thing and car thing and all back in the days. I was like shocked, like, oh, now they're the guys for food, right? Like, from my childhood, I remember Michelin for the tire thing and all, for car issues,
And actually, they started doing these guides because, well, I mean, the job Michelin's core business is tires. And why did they start doing that? Because they realized that if they want people to buy tires, they need to use their tires and they need to wear them out and buy new ones. So they tried to get people to travel around the country. And that's why they thought that developing tourism guides would make people move around more. And that's how it all started. And then it became really people got addicted to that, and they wanted to have Michelin guides everywhere. And now having Michelin-starred chefs is really an attraction for tourism in a country, and or having hotels that are also recognized by Michelin and all that. And so that has become an important part of their business as well. But they still do that for free, you know, at the moment. They just, of course, they pay for their meals because they do it completely anonymously. Nobody knows who they are. So it's completely, you know, there's completely
blind review.
Nobody knows who they are. They don't do anything special. They're just a normal client. And they go to visit hotels, they go to different places, and it's all paid for by Michelin. So it's quite actually a generous.
Fingers crossed. I hope to see.
So why not? I think it will make a lot of sense, because I think the Philippines are reaching the level now where it makes sense to get the chefs to be better known, get also the tourism scene to be better known, the attractions, what you can do, and there's so much you can do in this country.
Yeah, we have gorgeous beaches, one of the best in the world. I mean, I'm glad like Vogue magazine, some of the really cutting edge publications out there, they're highlighting how great the Philippine scenes are, but I hope to see more of the Philippine food scenery. I think that's also a fantastic one.
And culture as well, vibrant culture.
It's very much
historical sites. There's you have UNESCO sites, beautiful sites like, I don't know, the Underground River in Palawan, or the rice terraces in Banaue. That allowed me, when I visited Banaue, to discover the Ifugao cuisine as well.
Yes, very different. The native chicken, the red rice, it's something very different.
Exactly.
let me a little bit ask more about this before going to the other aspect of culture, which I know are very close to your heart. You know, how is the education scene doing? I remember when I was teaching in Ateneo, I had a lot of students from CNSPO, for instance, right? And we have a lot of good friends from CNSPO. I have a number of friends who are studying CNSPO. I mean, generally in the Philippines, we have a strong linkages with American university and to a lesser degree with Australia and United Kingdom. But what about educational collaboration between our top institutions and yours? You know, I mean, I personally know how great your universities are, but I'm just not sure they're as much appreciated here, and vice versa. I suppose that's also the issue, right? Like Sorbonne and
yes, we do have collaboration, but we're really trying to bring it to the next level and to increase it, because of course it slowed down because of the pandemic, because people couldn't travel anymore. So it was, you know, a bit of a gap. So we're restarting again. So there are projects, like there's an initiative funded by the Senate, actually, in trying to bring Philippine studies in Sciences Po.
Yes.
And so Sciences Po has agreed to that. So we would be doing a program probably in June, I think, or something like that.
And it will be like international language, or it will be like French strictly?
It would be, no, it could be international. I mean, because
so like I can apply. I'm just kidding.
And also we have a lot of scholarships also for students, to allow students to go to French universities. Lots of students are a bit afraid of the language barrier, but actually we do also some of the teaching international sections in English, so it means that Filipino students can also study in France in English. It used to be very different, it used to be really French, but now we're doing a mix, and so that allows foreign students to be, let's say, finding it easier to start with. And in the end, they always learn French, and because they want to talk to other people, they meet girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, and they speak French in the end. But initially, there's this mix of languages. And so we're really trying to promote that. We're trying to promote also to help students get to know better. So we have students' fairs where we showcase what we're doing in the different segments, not only in Paris, by the way, but also in other cities, because we have really good universities in other cities as well. Marseille, Nice, Bordeaux, Lyon, Grenoble, I mean, so many different places. So there's a variety of this specific potential. And we're also trying to showcase the Filipinos that are success stories, because there's so many success stories in people who studied in the Philippines, which is why last October we had this big event organized by the French Chamber of Commerce, and we gave awards to some of the well-known Filipino alumni, like in all different areas, like medicine or science or economy or fashion, or, you know, all kinds of different areas, and we're going to continue with that. And those people can be the best examples, and they can explain why they were so interested with France, why they loved studying in France, and why they would advise other students to go, and showcase that you can really have a very, very interesting career. You don't have to go to specific areas. You can study in a variety of countries and have a very interesting professional life back in the Philippines as well. So that's what we're trying to do and to promote. And we are trying to work a lot more with universities and French universities and Philippine universities and different schools as well, specialized schools.
I'm seeing more European cars, but it's not the usual German cars. Now I'm seeing more Peugeot. I mean, like some of the French cars here, you know. What's happening? How's the trajectory of bilateral trade investment involved?
Well, it's going really well. I mean, there's a lot more attention given by French companies to the Philippines, and we have a lot more French companies being present here, investing in the Philippines in a variety of areas. It's really quite vibrant. At the moment, we have around, I would say, 130 French companies in the Philippines, which is really not bad at all. And some of them are really big employers. We've created 62,000 jobs last year, for example, which is quite a lot. It's quite sizable. And it's growing. And we have companies coming in the Philippines with very important projects that they're going to develop. For example, recently, Alstom and Colas Rail as a consortium, they're going to be doing all the electromechanic part of the North-South commuter railway. So they're coming, they're bringing in a lot of people, French people, but not only, more globally. They're going to employ a lot of people here in the Philippines, so that's going to be creating employment. There's investment in new technologies like new technologies, or like, let's say, a renewable energy, for
Right.
example. There's a big
France is big,
project
yeah.
with Total Energy doing this kind of project. It's going to be a huge solar farm, for example, and some niche also with extremely creative, innovative young French companies like Hydrogen of France,
Right.
creating a project.
Startup style. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in Zamboanga City, so they're not
Right.
only in Manila, they're all over the country. And they're creating jobs also, and they're bringing, new techniques to store electricity and energy.
And what about nuclear energy? I mean, I know this is quite controversial. I mean, at least for some quarters. What's going on there? Because France relies heavily on nuclear, energy. I was just in Spain the other month, and we're looking at the, payload and electricity. And you could see in France, you're very, very reliant on nuclear technology, even compared to some major economies in Europe. Are you looking at sharing the technology here, especially with the new administration looking at diversification of our base?
Well, yeah, I mean, nuclear energy is very important in France. I mean, if you take our electricity, for example, 70% of electricity is produced by nuclear power plants, and 27% is produced by renewable energy like hydroelectricity or other sources, which means that our dependence on gas, for example, was only 3%.
Right.
And during the Ukraine crisis,
yeah.
I mean, because of the Russian invasion, and then it was a huge problem for many countries that were really very
Germany,
heavily
for
dependent
instance,
on Russian gas. So that wasn't the case for us. And what happens also is that electricity is really cheap because we invested in nuclear power plants a long time ago. And the cost of electricity is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in Europe. So, of course, that allowed us also to share our electricity with countries that were more affected by the crisis with Russian gas, for example. And we have our technologies, we have knowledge, we have a long experience, we've never had a problem of any kind. We have nuclear physicists, we have safety regulation agencies.
Yeah, because the safety is a big
that.
issue, right? I mean,
Yes.
you have Energiewende in Germany for quite some time, especially under Merkel, Chancellor Merkel. She emphasized, moving away from, because of what happened in Fukushima, etc. Like, what do you have to say about the critics who are saying is like, I'm not sure if nuclear technology is the right one for the 21st century. It made sense in the 20th century.
I think this has changed, and because of that crisis recently, there's a lot of change in the public opinion. I mean, in France, it's always been well accepted. I mean, there were moments where there were questions or whatever, but the acceptance by the population is absolutely huge. And of course, with the current crisis, it's even bigger because people realize that it's a big advantage currently because it gives us more independence in production. I mean, obviously, it's there was these questions like Fukushima and others, but we also talked to our Japanese counterparts on that, and we learn also the lessons, and we can produce our energy from nuclear power plants with complete security, which we've done for a number of years. Now there are new technologies as well, and of course the smart modular reactor are very interesting technologies. So for a country like the Philippines, the problem you have in the Philippines at the moment is that, electricity is
very expensive.
It's very expensive. It's mostly produced from fossil fuels like coal or gas, and there is a real wish to change the mix and to make it greener, less carbonated. And so exploring nuclear can be an option. So of course we have the larger plants like the ones we've been traditionally having in France for so many years, but we're moving now very much to the newer technology. The modular reactors are very different. You don't have to build a huge building to host smart modular reactors. Actually, the technology comes from what we use also in nuclear-powered submarines. So it's very compact, very small. And you don't build an SMR, you assemble it from different parts and pieces, and it's contained. And so then you have to put it, of course, you have to house it somewhere. But the modular reactor it's really contained, and it's quite it's a much safer technique for a country with earthquakes or this kind of phenomenon.
With fault lines
it's
and
so
all
much
that,
easier to protect and to install somewhere when it's not going to be affected. It's also smaller. It can produce electricity for a country like an archipelago like yours has huge challenges because of, having the
7,000
islands.
no
Exactly.
national integrated
What about
grid.
the grid? There's also an issue about the grid. So that allows you to have capacity to serve smaller communities. And so that's something worth exploring. But of course, you have to put into place the whole system, which means regulatory system.
Right.
You have to be compliant with the requirements of the
IAEA.
the IAEA. You have to make sure that you have your lawmakers are regulating how it's going to be organized. You have to create a pool of scientists also that can deal with that. You have to create your safety authority that is going to regulate that, and so on and so forth. So it takes time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It will take time to build up the whole environment.
What about the waste management part of it? Because many are saying, yes, a lot of technological breakthroughs have happened, but still managing the nuclear waste is something that some would say is not handled properly yet, or there's no permanent solution. Or
there's something we've been dealing with for so many years, because we've had so many years of experience, and we've been dealing with those big power plants. So the smart modular ones are much smaller, so you don't generate so much waste, and it's not completely dealt with in the same way. But you have to have also your facilities. And of course, we have experience with that, of course, and we can really share that experience and expertise. And we're quite happy to organize study tours and to show how things are being done, to share the knowledge and expertise we've acquired. But then it's a political decision at some point, of course.
Yeah.
There's been discussion between our two presidents on what are the priorities of the cooperation between France and the Philippines, and they've identified a few areas. They've identified the maritime sector in all its components, including the security, defense aspect. They've identified food security, which is a major issue in the world at the moment as well. They've identified, of course, energy security, and finally all the global issues like climate change issues, biodiversity issues in particular. So that's part of the dialogue we have at the moment. And
you notice now we're already in the territory of more contentious issues. It came earlier than I thought. But one reason in the Philippines there's a lot of skepticism about nuclear technology is because of the precedents. As particular, we're talking about the Bataan nuclear power plant. As you know, reports suggest that IAEA, for instance, like 2000 or like hundreds of technical problems, huge corruption issues, cost overruns. I actually visited the plant. I also visited Fukushima 2 years after the incident. And because I've been studying also the German case, the French case is something I'm yet to know more about. So I was in Spain for the renewable energy, for instance. Because some would say, okay, there's a thing with nuclear technology, but does the Philippines have the right regulatory environment to ensure we can keep it as safe and sensible and non-corruptible as we have in some of the more advanced, mature democracies like yours? Right, that's one area of concern. And the others were saying, and I get this a lot from our German friends, is like, why not just leapfrog and go for more aggressive, full renewable, for instance? The things we see in northern Philippines, the windmills, and as also the storage capacity, the battery technology also improves. I suppose France is also gonna is a player in that realm, right? As far as the other forms, or some would say real forms of renewable energy are concerned. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we are working on different kinds of diversifying your sources of energy. But then renewable are very interesting sources. But at the moment, most of the renewable you cannot have on a full-time basis. I mean, if you have solar energy, it's not a 24/7. If you have wind energy, it's not 24/7. It's a challenge for a country like the Philippines, because you also have typhoons and all of that. So you have to have techniques that are adapted to your country, and so on. So you have to have an energy mix. You cannot rely on only one source of energy. You cannot rely on solar energy only. You cannot rely on wind energy. And if you need to have storage facilities like hydrogen, for example, or others, which are really creative and new. But it's very difficult to imagine that that's going to be the only source you're going to have in your country. And then there's a question of the cost also of energy.
Yes.
Because if your energy is expensive, then you're going to be less attractive to foreign investment, because the cost of energy is one of the areas that if you want to develop an industry, it's
especially
that.
manufacturing,
Exactly.
it's a big problem for
It's
the Philippines,
big
utility
issue,
costs, yeah.
So you probably have to have a mix, and then you
Right.
can have some nuclear in your mix. But of course, you have to have the proper environment. You just have to make sure that you're properly regulated. That needs to have inspections. It needs to have make sure the facilities are properly maintained, and so on.
Where are we now as far as AUKUS is concerned, and as far as France's relationship with the AUKUS is concerned? Because now people are saying maybe you have to put the letter F in addition to AUKUS. People are making all sorts of memes and permutations about what if France joins AUKUS or wants to help it. Like, what's going on there with the AUKUS and the French connection?
Well, I mean, first of all, we just heard recently about what were the next steps in AUKUS, because
Right.
that was announced some time ago, but we didn't really know where it was going. So there were announcements on what was planned within the alliance. At the moment, there's no plan for France to join AUKUS. I mean, definitely when the announcement was made, it was made in a rather unexpected
Right.
way, which is the reason why we were a bit upset.
To put it mildly, rather unexpected.
Because we had 2+2 meetings just 2 weeks before, where we were told that everything was perfect and it was all going well, and then all of a sudden we realized that there were
They
issues.
pulled out, yeah.
So of course we were a little bit upset with that, but we started engaging in conversation with the partners in AUKUS, and definitely conversations with the US were engaged very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There was an understanding that indeed maybe it was more the way it's been announced, that the fact that, I mean,
Right.
everybody is completely free to change their mind, to decide of other choices, and we quite understand that.
I mean, the
So
Australians did that to the Japanese too. I understand
Yeah.
Surya submarine was also one of their options early on. So you're not the first one
And
that
you
they
know,
kind of
this-
dumped.
and this is the ups and downs of
Yeah.
any relationship.
Right.
So yes, we re-engaged discussion. We re-engaged discussions, of course. Well, I mean, Australia decided to really re-engage with us at a very high level, and there was an official visit of the Prime Minister to France, and we've really raised the level of our relationship. As you saw, there were also contacts at the highest level between
Right.
France and the UK. So we definitely are in conversation, and of course there are moments where we can see things differently, and then we all have to cooperate in a way. I mean, security at the moment is a very high challenge, and we cannot afford to be divided on issues. So definitely things are evolving, and they've evolved a lot.
in a
terms
good
of the-
direction, because I remember last year during the Munich Security Conference, your foreign minister was a little bit, he was still upset. I could see that he gives a speech. It was the Quad panel, but when I was in Paris a week later on, thanks to you, I mean, I got to also meet our counterparts and French minister, etc., discuss things. I was told that actually your foreign minister was holding actually an event with Quad members in Australia, among others, and I was told that things went very well by my contacts there. So I was thinking maybe there's a lot of drama, on stage drama, but behind the scenes maybe things are being patched up.
Not only, I think that when you're unhappy about something, and we had reason to be
Yeah.
unhappy about that, you really need to raise it and to bring it to the right level. And I think we told our partners why we were upset, and what needed to change, and that we needed to rebuild the trust, and we needed to
Right.
rebuild the relation. And they agreed that indeed somehow things could have been done differently, and that we still needed to be finding ways of working together, and we still needed to rebuild the trust and the relation. And that happened little by little, different speed according to the different partners. And we have to see where our best defense interests are,
Right.
where the strategy is. When we all have an Indo-Pacific strategy in this region, is really absolutely key. It's at the core of our concerns, but we have to dialogue, we have to talk, we have to work together, we have to see what we can do together differently, better. How can we relate to each other, and make sure that we learn from the lessons of what happened, because we really don't want things to happen again. It's not a good way to work among allies and among close allies. I mean, the US is our oldest ally in a sense,
Right.
and we have many partners that we really want to rebuild the trust and work with, and I think we're really in very good way, and see what's the best in terms of our common vision of the world, and we see that the world is really unstable, and we just
Speaking
have
of
to turn the
instability,
page and go to the
I want to
future.
push on this point, Ambassador. I mean, Philippines was perhaps the only country in Southeast Asia that kind of publicly supported AUKUS. I mean, at least that's my contention. And Philippines is exceptional for many reasons. We have a treaty alliance with the United States. We have a South Forces agreement with Australia. We're working on something. I mean, I'm already talking about the JAFUS, Japan, Philippine, US kind of trilateral alliance. From the French perspective, how important is AUKUS for regional balance and security? Because that's the argument of our foreign ministry here. From the Duterte to Marcos administration, our line is quite consistent. We're essentially saying China is becoming very powerful. China has actually not only nuclear powered, but nuclear missile carrying submarines, and they're huge naval force, and they're building their navy unlike anything in human history, just the speed by which they're rolling out frigates and all. What is the understanding of France and or European Union in general, and how is it different from, let's say, the American way of looking at it, or Japanese? Is there a unique EU or French understanding of how the balance how the balance of power in the region is evolving, and what should be done about it accordingly?
I think we probably have a slightly different approach. I mean, it's obvious that China is a big country. It's the second largest economy in the world. It's developed also a fleet. It's developed a presence in the region that is much more assertive than it used to be in the past. I think the difference between our Indo-Pacific strategy, I mean, France started having an Indo-Pacific strategy.
And first Indo-Pacific ambassador, if I'm not mistaken, was France, right? Yeah.
Yes. And Germany, and then the Netherlands, and then from that we decided
EU.
that we needed to make it EU and to have a strategy. So our vision is that we don't want to be confrontational. We think that there are different ways in which we can work with the country. We think that a country like China, there are areas where we want to partner with China, like the global issues, climate change, and others. We need to work with China because they're a big emitter. So if we want to have progress in climate change, we need to have some cooperation. And it worked because we see that China has been delivering on a number of areas in these global issues, like the Kunming-Montreal conference on biodiversity was very constructive, on oceans, and a number of issues. There's been progress made that benefited the whole of the international community. Then there are areas where we are rivals, like in terms of commercially, we may, there are markets and so on, and there are areas that are much more sensitive. So we have the scope of, going from areas where we can partner to areas where we just see the world in a very different way. But we allow space for that. With the EU strategy and the French-German
I think
Dutch
EU uses the term like systemic rival or something like that.
Yeah, systemic rival.
Which is like everyone's like scratching their head. How is this different from the American understanding of strategic rivalry? I mean, in what sense? I mean, one of the big questions people also ask in ASEAN, in the region, is like, what's up with the French and British? Why should they be here? I mean, of course, I understand you have territories actually in this part of the world, but I think not many people appreciate. But can you tell us why the presence of Europe strategically and increasingly militarily, because you're doing naval deployments here, why is it important? Why should we appreciate your presence here? Because some would say you're just adding fuel to fire.
Well, for us, I mean, first of all, for the whole of the world, this region is very important because it's a very large part of trade, it's a very large part of production, it's a very large part of the global economy. The ASEAN, for example, is really as a group, it's a very important partner for all of us in the region, and so of course we need to continue working on this partnership. France, of course, is probably the only European country to be really present in the region with our territories in French Polynesia, what is in Futuna, New Caledonia, and we have between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, where we also have territories. We have over 2 million French citizens, so which is quite important.
Huge,
and more than 90% of our exclusive economic zone is in these two oceans. In fact, so
wow,
that is quite important. It's a lot for us. So there's a lot at stake for us, and we have a permanent military presence in these regions, and they do our fleets and our armed forces in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean perform a number of tasks that can go from HADR, I mean, or, disaster reduction or humanitarian assistance. For us, there's no difference between the what is here, the Navy and the Coast Guards, for example. The Navy has the role that the Coast Guards have here in supporting people as well. So we do that, and it's very important. And we have patrols around the world also because, like the UK, for example, we are a P5 country in the UN, so we are a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So security in the world is, of course, also our concern. This region is important commercially. It's important for strategic reasons. It's important for a number of causes. And so we have a military presence, and we also patrol our ship, our navy around the world. And when we're talking also
including through the West Philippine Sea or South China Sea,
of
right?
Course, including. We one of the pillars for us for international relations is multilateralism, and we support that. This is very, very important. We built with Germany a program called Alliance for Multilateralism. And if you believe in multilateralism, you cannot just say it, you have to walk the talk, and you have to show that you're actually acting on it, which is why we deploy our fleet, which is why we deploy, including nuclear attack submarines, like the Emerald was in this region, and just patrol the waters here because freedom of navigation. And we support that. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
And the Philippine arbitration case, I remember the other year you had three-way British, German, French note verbal to the United Nations when you mentioned, hey, this is final, this is binding, and we stand with the Philippines. I think that was very important. We appreciated that. Are we going to see more of that? Do you feel more confident, especially now we have an administration in the Philippines that also is asserting it, maybe a little bit more than before, let me just put it that way, right?
I mean, you cannot, if you decide you want to follow the rule of law, you want to follow the UN Convention, you cannot choose and pick and decide what you're going to apply, what you're not going to apply. So yes, definitely we're supporting that, and we're acting on that basis. And yes, we are present in the region. Yes, we're doing more joint exercises and drills with our navies in this region and with the Philippines. For example, we participated in Sabah.
Yes, I wanted to actually go to the bilateral, right? Because, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, not long ago you had goodwill visits by our French naval counterparts, and I think I've been traveling around the region. I know in Vietnam, for instance, you have had interesting, good relations with them, with India, with Australia, but now with the Philippines. I mean, what are you looking at in terms of bilateral maritime security cooperation? Are we looking at sales of submarines or frigates to the Philippines, or are we looking at just capacity building, Coast Guard, just domain awareness, just those basic things?
It's not just a matter of selling, equipment. It's a matter of really building a relation and a partnership in the Philippines and in the region. Because yes, I can do bilateral, but multilateral or regional as well. I mean, we have developed this kind of cooperation and actually putting into place, a real long-term vision with Malaysia. We're building it with Indonesia, with Singapore, where we have a lot of very, very active cooperation, and that is also happening with the Philippines. We've had cooperation with the Philippines in defense for a long time. We have on a regular basis some of your high-level officers being trained in our defense college, and we call the War College in France. It's a 1.5-year training, and we train them on a regular basis. We have a lot of joint drills and exercise that we want to increase in also HADR, like Marara or Southern Cross exercise, where Philippines participate all the time. We have training. What we need to build, what we want to build, is really a partnership. It's a cooperation. It's not a one-shot. It's not something that we just come and we sell something and go. So it's basically the relationship
long-term strategic partnership.
Long-term, yes. And so we're going to have protocols where we had the PASEX recently with the Prairial, our frigate. We're going to have a frigate coming here also at the end of June to have joint exercises. We will have a visit of Rear Admiral Dandinier, who is our new Admiral Joint Commander of the Armed Forces, French Armed Forces in the Pacific. Will be here, will be spending time meeting his counterparts, discussing, meet also in other fora like Shangri-La Dialogue and many others, but he wants to come here and visit and be able to talk to his counterparts on how to build the cooperation. So this is really a long-term, and it's an inclusive vision of working together and being a trusted long-term partner.
Ambassador, I just realized that there's so much more to discuss, and I think it's almost like it's almost approaching an hour as far as conversation is concerned. Now, a little bit like looking forward, we're still new into this administration as far as the Ferdinand Marcos Jr. administration is concerned. I think so far the signal has been very positive, at least with our Western allies. I think ironically, some would even say in the West, he's a breath of fresh air, which is something I didn't expect to be said about Marcos back in the day because of the history and everything like that. What are your hopes for the bilateral relationship? What are the low-hanging fruits perhaps, and what are the more feasible big things we can do in the coming years? So are we looking at Macron also visiting the Philippines in the near future? I know you guys are going to be busy with your Olympics. Macron has just visited the region, Asia, Beijing. Well, our president goes around a lot, as you understand, perhaps for good reasons. Is there a kind of a state visit in the pipelines? What should we look forward to in terms of big, grand, interesting events between the two countries?
Well, I really think we need to bring our relations to the next level now.
Right.
And as our president already talked and met. They met in New York in the margins at the General Assembly. They met in Bangkok in the margins at the APEC summit. And our president actually sent a letter of invitation proposing a state visit, which is the highest level of a visit in France to your president. So we're very happy to welcome him at any time that is convenient for him. Some people already told me here in Manila that it would be nice also to have a return visit in the sense that our president comes, which sounds really exciting. So, I mean, all of this is possible. And we are really looking forward to increasing the level of our relation, to extending the level of our relation. As we've been discussing since the beginning, I think we have a lot in common. So it would be a great opportunity to take our relations to the next step and to be able to do more together in a variety of domains. And a state visit is a good opportunity to really bring things to the next level, to discuss a variety of topics. But that is very much in the hands of presidents, and they will have to decide what they choose to do and how and when. And we are there to make things happen, but they are the decision makers. Exciting times.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Michéle Boccoz, for that very comprehensive discussion. I hope this is just the beginning of this kind of conversation and the beginning for a new era in bilateral relationship between France and the Philippines. On that note, thank you very much for joining us for The View from Manila. So there you are, Philippine-French relations, so many potentials and so many things to look forward to. Oh, and by the way, please.
A little bit of documentation.
Yes, thank you very much for this.
That's what we did last year. And that's what we did in March. So you can really look at all the areas we're working on.
Thank you very much. So, Ambassador, maybe this will be our next topic.
Exactly. Some much more to discuss.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Merci beaucoup. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Catch us again next Monday, 9:30 p.m. on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify. I am Richard Hidarian, and that is The View from Manila.